Warren G. The tension between Warren G and Suge Knight started over something simple, a piece of advice. At the time, Warren G and Snoop Dogg were not just label mates to be, they were best friends and part of the same group, 213. When Snoop was about to sign his first major contract, Warren tried to look out for him, warning him not to sign anything without a lawyer's input. That one comment would spark a chain of events that nearly cost Warren G his life.
I told Snoop, I said, no, don't sign that. Cause you don't know what you signing. You gotta get a lawyer to look at that stuff.
Word of Warren's warning got back to Suge Knight, and the atmosphere around Death Row Records shifted instantly. Warren later said he found himself cornered in a building by Suge, who confronted him for interfering with his business. Warren didn't back down, but the encounter left him shaken. From that point forward, things got darker.
And they had pushed me up against the wall, and I was like, Blood, you told them not to sign that contract, Blood. Blah, blah, blah. I said, if you don't get your hands off me, I'm calling my brother. I'm calling all my homeboys.
Not long after, Warren claimed that members of Suge's Pyru circle showed up to threaten him, guns to his mouth, intimidation, and constant pressure. He said the fear became so intense that he started carrying 2 9mm pistols everywhere he went. In one particularly tense moment, Warren said he almost pulled the trigger on Suge himself. He described seeing Knight storming down a hallway with his entourage yelling for him, and in that instant, he thought he might have to kill the man just to survive.
I'm just chilling, so he walk up on me like he tripping and just wham, just snatch my. Mind you, I had a 40 Glock on my hip. I could have pulled that out and started busting.
Suge Knight, of course, denied all of it. According to him, the confrontation never happened, or at least not the way Warren described. Suge claimed the only time they ever had a problem was over something minor, like Warren using the studio phone without permission. In his version, there was no violence, no threats, and definitely no guns. He even said they wished they'd signed Warren G to death row back then, hinting that the whole situation might have been a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion.
Tell me about that situation where Warren G told somebody not to sign a contract with Death Row until a lawyer seen him, and you found out and grabbed him.
That never happened. Never happened.
Still, Warren G's story fits into a much bigger picture, one that exposes the chaotic, cutthroat environment of Death Row Records during its rise. Warren's troubles mirrored what a lot of people around that label experienced, a mix of loyalty, intimidation, and financial manipulation that blurred the lines between business and street politics. What made it even more painful was the irony. Warren G was one of the main reasons Death Row even existed. He was the one who introduced Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, Daz, and Corrupt to Dr. Dre, the very artists who built the label's empire through the Chronic and Doggy style. But despite his influence, Warren never got signed to Death Row. Suge used this fact to throw shade at Dr. Dre, Warren's stepbrother, claiming that Dre didn't take care of his own people or make sure they got paid. After the fallout, Warren was effectively blacklisted from Death Row projects and tours. Dre told him to go do his own thing, advice that forced Warren back to square one. He returned to his old neighborhood, sleeping on the floor with nothing but his beat machine and determination.
At the end of the day, when it was time to start hitting the road and doing things like that, it was just like, we don't got a ticket for you, you ain't going. And I'm like, why? Shit, what the fuck? I had to go back to the hood, sleeping on the floor, and all I had was my crate of records that I was helping out with the Chronic.
That hunger eventually paid off when he linked up with Def Jam, dropped Regulate, G-Funk Era, and scored a massive hit with Regulate. Behind the scenes, Snoop Dogg later revealed that he, Corrupt, and others quietly ghost-wrote parts of that album to help Warren avoid any financial grip from Suge Knight. It was a clever move to protect the homie and keep Suge from claiming ownership or royalties. Still, Suge twisted the story years later, accusing Warren of lying about who wrote what and calling it fraud against his publishing company. The tension between the two didn't stop in the 90s either. Decades later, the feud flared up again when Warren spoke publicly about Tupac. He said that back in 1995, before Suge posted Tupac's bail, he was actually planning to do it himself, not for money or credit, but out of respect. He also said he'd hoped to mediate the feud between Tupac and Biggie before things turned deadly. Suge Knight fired back hard, publicly calling Warren a liar and claiming Tupac didn't even mess with him like that. He also mocked Warren's claim about posting bail, saying he couldn't have afforded it. Warren hit right back, pointing to his Def Jam success, the Benzes he bought and the homes he owned, proof he had the money. He also reminded everyone of the songs he produced for Tupac, like Definition of a Thug Ninja and How Long Will They Mourn Me, as receipts of their connection. Uncle Luke. The tension between Uncle Luke and Suge started with Dr. Dre, and it goes back to the early 90s, but its roots were planted even before that, when Dre was still part of NWA. According to stories from the road, one of two Live Crew's dancers allegedly spent the night with Dre and Eazy-E while both groups were touring together. That didn't sit right with Luke, who was known for being loud, brash, and unapologetic. Things reportedly got heated, and Luke eventually pulled his crew off the tour.
The girls spent the night, our dancers spent the night with Dr. Dre and them, and Luke left them. Basically, Luke left them.
But beneath all the personal drama, there was already bad blood brewing between Miami's two Live Crew and the rising power circle of West Coast rap. The first official shot came from Luke himself. In 1992, he dropped the track Fakin' Like Gangsters off his album I Got Ish on My Mind. The record went straight at artists pretending to live the life they rapped about, and everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Luke brought up Dr. Dre's early days in the 1980s electro group World Class Wreckin' Crew, mocking the shiny outfits and soft, love song style Dre had left behind. He rapped, "Like ninjas making love songs first, next time you see 'em all they do is curse, talking about all the ninjas they killed. First they was lovers, now they trying to be real." The timing was key. It came just months before The Chronic hit the streets. When The Chronic dropped later that year, Dre and Snoop didn't just respond, they went nuclear. The song F with Dre and Everybody Celebratin' wasn't just aimed at Eazy-E and Jerry Heller. Hidden in the third verse were venomous bars clearly meant for Luke. Snoop fired off with, "Luke's bending over, so Luke's getting effed." Then Dre piled on, "Gap teeth in your mouth so my D's gots to fit. With my nuts on your tonsils while you're on stage rapping at your whack-ass concert." Dre even threatened him, rapping, "I'ma rob you in Compton and blast you in Miami." The video for Dre Day made it worse, featuring a parody of Luke jumping around on stage. Dre followed up with more shots on the B-side track, puffing on blunts and drinking Tanqueray. The message was clear. Death Row was calling out Luke publicly and viciously. Luke wasted no time firing back. In 1993, he released Cowards in Compton on his album Luke in the Nude. The record was direct and brutal, calling out Dre and Snoop's street credibility while dragging up Dre's sequined past with the Wreckin' Crew. Luke painted them as fake tough guys, mocking the transformation from sparkly jackets to gangster gear, rapping, "Before you diss my ninja Luke, you better think twice. I'll pull the trigger, ninja, and turn off your lights." He also sent a warning shot, making it clear that Miami wasn't afraid of Compton's biggest names. The album even included a skit clowning Dre's appearance, keeping the disrespect alive. Everything came to a head at the Jack the Rapper convention in Atlanta, sometime in 1992 or 1993. It was supposed to be a networking event for artists and executives, but it turned into an all-out war zone. Luke had tried to reach out to Suge Knight before the event, warning that there were a lot of Miami people around and things could get ugly. Death Row brushed it off and paid the price. When the two sides finally clashed in the Marriott Hotel, chaos exploded. Witnesses described an all-out brawl with fists flying, glass breaking, and weapons flashing. Some accounts say people were beaten with golf clubs. Others said blood was on the floor.
And Dre and Snoop ended up dissing Luke. And that situation kind of culminates in Miami, where Death Row and Luke's crew ends up getting this huge brawl. Right, I heard that a lot of knives got pulled out that day.
Luke ended up bloodied but claimed his crew won that fight. Death Row members, including Snoop Dogg and Daz Dillinger, reportedly took a hell of an ass whooping before being forced out of Atlanta. The next day, Suge allegedly came back with reinforcements, targeting anyone wearing a Luke Records shirt and even attacking R&B singer Keith Sweat. The fight wasn't just about ego, it was a statement. The South, led by Luke, wasn't going to be bullied by West Coast rap's most feared label. At that time, Luke was considered the king of the South, and this moment proved that Southern rap was ready to stand its ground. Eventually, the feud cooled off. Luke and Suge later squashed the beef at a Super Bowl event in Miami, putting years of hostility behind them. Despite the lyrical venom and physical clashes, Luke's role in hip-hop history remained undeniable. He was a pioneer, pushing boundaries for freedom of speech and Southern rap long before it became mainstream. Even Snoop Dogg eventually gave him his flowers, publicly saying how much he respected what Luke did for hip-hop on and off the mic. Members of Wu-Tang Clan. The tension between Wu-Tang Clan and Suge Knight's Death Row Records first surfaced on one of hip-hop's most infamous nights, the 1995 Source Awards in New York City. The event was already charged with energy, with the East Coast-West Coast rivalry beginning to take shape, when Suge got on stage and delivered his now legendary shot at Puff Daddy, telling artists tired of seeing their producers dancing in their videos to come to death row. The entire building shook with noise and tension.
I want to stay a star. I don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the video, all on the record, dancing. Come to death row.
In that crowd were Old Dirty Bastard and Raekwon of Wu-Tang Clan. Though the Wu had always tried to stay neutral in the brewing coastal war, they weren't passive bystanders that night.
You guys were there at the Source Awards when Suge got on stage and was like, for all y'all artists who don't want the CEO all up in your videos dancing, come to death row. And
Yep.
ODB and Raekwon reportedly had words with Suge's entourage outside the venue. Ghostface Killah would later recall that ODB, never one to bite his tongue, was furious at the disrespect coming from Suge's camp and was ready to go all in right there in New York. He had to be physically restrained by his crew, and Ghostface admitted they had everything necessary to handle it if they really wanted to. It was a moment that could have turned deadly if cooler heads hadn't stepped in. Things went quiet for a while, at least until 1996 when the beef reignited, this time far from home. RZA, the creative mastermind behind Wu-Tang, was in Las Vegas when he got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, Suge's nightclub, Club 662. That night, RZA was jumped by several death row affiliates. He was punched in the mouth and his signature chain, the Angel of Death piece, was snatched off his neck. Death Row wanted to prove that even the most respected East Coast crews could be touched on their turf.
And RZA got his ass whooped. He got his ass whooped in there, where they ended up snatching his chain while they were whooping his ass.
The incident had the potential to explode into something massive, a full-blown war between coasts, this time involving two of the most powerful movements in hip-hop. But before it could get that far, an unexpected figure stepped in to defuse the situation: Tupac Shakur. Not long after the assault, Method Man ran into Tupac and Suge at an after-party while he was tripping on shrooms. Even in that wild moment, he remembered Tupac pulling him aside to talk about what had happened. Pac had tracked down the guys who took RZA's chain, got it back himself, and returned it to its rightful owner. He personally apologized to RZA, making it clear that what happened wasn't ordered or approved by him or Death Row's top brass. Pac went a step further, saying that if Death Row ever collaborated with anyone from the East, it would be Wu-Tang.
I saw Wu-Tang, I saw Method Man, and like a couple months earlier, one of they niggas had got, he was in our club, 662, and somebody snatched his chain, put hands on him. And I went to Method Man like, yo, we handled that, me and Suge want to talk to you. That was never our orders.
Method Man remembered seeing Suge standing there silently with a cigar, letting Tupac handle the situation. It was one of the few moments where Suge didn't need to be the loudest or most feared man in the room. Tupac's respect for the clan and his understanding of what Wu-Tang represented, real street credibility and power, brought the temperature down. The apology worked, the situation ended without bloodshed, and Death Row's respect for Wu-Tang was permanently established. MC8. The root of the conflict started with a long-standing rivalry between MC8 and DJ Quick. 8 repped the Tragnew Park Crips, while Quick was a Treetop Pyru Blood. Their beef had been brewing for years, bar for bar, diss for diss, and it spilled from wax to real-life tension.
Honestly, to me, this Quick got started over just people's misunderstandings of it. He was a Blood, I was a Crip. Okay, that was natural.
While all this was happening, DJ Quick began forming closer ties with Death Row Records. He and Suge Knight were both from Compton, both connected to the Bloods, and shared a mutual understanding of the streets. Suge's growing influence in the industry only made Quick's position stronger, and by extension, increased the pressure on 8. At the height of this deadly rivalry, something unexpected happened that brought Suge and 8 face to face. By sheer coincidence, MC8's mother lived directly across the street from Suge Knight's mother in Compton. That coincidence turned into a tense but ultimately defining moment. One day, Suge pulled up on 8 outside his mother's house with what 8 later described as around 30 men from the Bloods. It looked like a setup for an ambush, but it turned out to be the opposite. Instead of escalating the situation, Suge drew a line of respect. He made it clear that while things between the Bloods and Crips were hot, the violence would never touch their mother's neighborhood. 8 said he was told that he had nothing to worry about while his mother lived there. It was one of the rare times Suge Knight showed restraint and a sense of street ethics, enforcing the unspoken rule that family homes were sacred no matter the colors involved.
And he just wanted to tell me, you know, as far as the situation that was going down with me and Quick, it wouldn't be trickled over until my mom's place of residence.
But peace on one street didn't mean peace everywhere. 8 later claimed that when one of his Compton's most wanted crew members, the unknown DJ, tried to link up with Death Row, Suge's men jumped him. Suge would eventually bring DJ Quick deeper into the Death Row circle, letting him work on projects even though he never released a full album under the label. That association boosted Quick's credibility and tightened his grip on the West Coast scene at the time, but the violence didn't stop there. It ended up costing someone their life. On March 13, 1995, at an exclusive invite-only party hosted by Death Row Records, things got out of control. Members from MC8's crew reportedly showed up and started pressing DJ Quick, and just like that, a fight broke out. The dance floor turned into chaos, people were running, yelling, trying to get out of the way. It was clear something serious was about to happen.
And then now you hear cats throwing up and saying they hoods. So all the homies doing that. Now at the end of the day, everybody in there drinking and all this shit. So it went haywire.
Caught right in the middle of all that was a man named Kelly Jamerson, who was said to be affiliated with MC8. He got caught up in the madness and was brutally jumped, beaten with chairs, bottles, and stomped by a crowd. Some witnesses claimed Suge Knight was right there watching it happen, and even worse, that he was egging it on. One person even said Suge shouted, "Y'all get that dude," while Kelly was being attacked. Sadly, Kelly didn't make it.
The melee started between everybody, just the Pyroots and pretty much any Quicks that will get, or any Crips that will get involved. And that's how he got stumped out.
Afterward, Death Row's team tried to distance themselves from the whole situation, saying it had nothing to do with any of their artists. DJ Quick would end up speaking on it years later, dropping some lines about that night in his song, Use a Gangsta. In the track, he raps, "Like I used to have a beef with this cat named 8, and his homies approached me at the Club El Rey. What was I to do? I'm on stage and I'm doing my thing, and this dude's out in the crowd trying to who bang. Giving it up for his homies and said tripping too, but he wasn't from Rollin' 60s, more like Trag New." He also touched on the rumors people were spreading about him, accusing him of getting someone killed. Toward the end of the track, he takes a more somber tone and gives a shout out to Kelly, saying it's also dedicated to the lil homie from 60s that lost his life at that party. As for Suge Knight, he did what Suge Knight always seemed to do when drama hit. He threw money at the problem. They reportedly settled the situation out of court with Kelly Jamerson's family. Nate Dogg. At first, everything between Nate Dogg and Suge Knight seemed cool. Suge even kept Nate out of prison. Back in the mid-90s, when Nate was making some of Death Row's biggest hits, he got arrested and charged for robbing a Taco Bell in San Pedro in 1994. This was a man who literally had a $15,000 check from Death Row in his pocket while allegedly robbing a fast food joint. Suge later claimed that wasn't even the only one, saying Nate had hit multiple Taco Bells. The whole thing could have destroyed Nate's career and landed him behind bars for over a decade, but Suge wasn't about to let one of his top artists go down like that. He pulled some serious strings, reportedly dropping between $250,000 and $500,000 to make the victim change their story. In court, the person who accused Nate suddenly said they were mistaken, and just like that, Nate Dogg walked free. Suge bragged about it later, calling it loyalty, paying big money to keep his artist out of prison.
If you take Nate Dogg robbed 7 taco. He once got 35 years. I paid $500,000. It means he didn't get no time.
But that kind of loyalty always came with strings attached. Nate Dogg went on to bless Death Row with his signature hooks and vocals on more than 60 hits. Yet when it came time to collect royalties, Suge claimed the label didn't make any profits. Years of unpaid money and shady business practices finally pushed Nate over the edge. He filed a $10 million lawsuit accusing Suge of exploiting his work and hiding profits through other companies. Chris Brown. He may not be a rapper, but he still ended up tangled with Suge Knight. The incident went down in August 2014 at a pre-MTV Video Music Awards party hosted by Chris at Winoak in West Hollywood. Out of nowhere, shots rang out, and Suge Knight got hit 7 times, in the abdomen, chest, and arm.
There was a pre-VMA party in Los Angeles, and a rapper by the name of Suge Knight got shot 6 times and had to be taken to the hospital after that took place.
He was rushed to the hospital and somehow survived. But instead of working with the police to find out who did it, Suge took a different route. He filed a lawsuit. In 2016, he sued Chris Brown and the club owners, claiming they were careless for not providing enough security. In his lawsuit, Suge's lawyers painted Chris as a known gang associate who regularly hosted violent events. They argued that because of his reputation, Chris should have made sure the place was properly secured and that no one with weapons or gang ties could get in. Suge even tried to use the shooting as part of his defense years later during his murder trial. His legal team said the trauma and health issues from that night left him paranoid and scared, which supposedly led to his actions in the fatal hit and run that followed. Suge also claimed he'd been told Dr. Dre had put a hit on him and that he went to the Straight Outta Compton set to confront Dre about it.
In Compton, when they were doing the Straight Outta Compton promotion videos and he was supposedly going to meet Dre, that's when Suge ended up at the Tams parking lot and he says he was ambushed and it was all at the behest of Dre.
But the whole lawsuit against Chris Brown eventually fell apart. In 2017, Suge dropped the case after Brown's legal team threatened to countersue for malicious prosecution if he didn't back down. Suge walked away empty-handed. Fabulous. The beef between Suge Knight and Fabulous started in the most unexpected way, over a few slick comments on the radio. Around the time Suge was trying to rebuild his empire and recruit new artists for what he called the new death row, he decided to make it clear what kind of rappers he wanted on his roster. During a radio interview in New York, Suge said he was looking for real street dudes, cool thug types, not no Fabulous type rappers. It was meant as a jab, painting Fabulous as soft.
With him, but he went on New York, I believe it was Hot 97, and said, the new road, we looking for artists, we looking for this type of artist, street thug, not no Fabulous type. He made a statement to that effect.
Word got back to Fabulous, and while most rappers might have ignored Suge Knight, especially during that era when his name still carried heavy weight, Fab wasn't the type to just let something like that slide. Not long after, the two crossed paths in Los Angeles, outside the House of Blues during a Def Jam party. Suge pulled up deep, rolling with his usual massive entourage, said to be about 50 people. But despite the numbers, the police had strict orders to keep Suge out of the venue, so he and his crew were stuck outside. That's when Fabulous rolled up in his little 2-seater Benz, spotted Suge, and decided to address the issue head-on. He called Suge over to his car and calmly asked what the deal was with those comments he made on the radio. Everyone who was there expected fireworks, after all this was Suge Knight, but what happened next caught everyone off guard. Instead of getting aggressive or making threats, Suge completely downplayed the situation. Witnesses say he laughed it off, telling Fab that he wasn't talking about him like that and that people had twisted his words. The whole thing turned into a surprisingly chill moment, with both of them laughing and even exchanging phone numbers before parting ways. According to those who were there, Fabulous handled the situation like a man, and Suge, despite his intimidating image, chose to keep the peace.
And Fabulous got at him like, man, what's up with that shit you were saying on the radio? And based on what Suge said and who I thought Suge was, I was surprised to hear him say, oh, you know it ain't like that, we ain't talking about.
For Spider Loc, a Death Row affiliate who witnessed the exchange, it was shocking to see Suge back down so easily. He later said he was genuinely impressed that Fabulous had the guts to stand on his word and confront someone like Suge, especially in that era when most people were still terrified of him. It showed that Fab had quiet confidence. He didn't come to start drama, but he wasn't afraid to address it either.
But Fabulous, to my surprise, like he approached Suge about the said about me on the radio in New York. Here I am in LA, and yeah, it's on my mind what's happening.
Later on, both men would give their own versions of what happened. Fabulous confirmed that the conversation took place, but he made it clear he wasn't trying to check Suge. He called it a man-to-man conversation and pointed out that no one in their right mind would try to confront Suge in LA surrounded by that many people. He was just clearing the air. Suge, on the other hand, tried to brush the whole thing off in interviews, claiming he never had any run-in with Fabulous at all. He even went to say he thought Fabulous was a great rapper who stayed in his lane, before veering off into a weird story involving Ray J and a supposed incident at a Floyd Mayweather party.